Hello, it's Omar Oakes, Editor-in-Chief of The Media Leader, back for another episode of The Media Leader podcast. And we've just finished one of our big London events, the Future of Audio and Entertainment, held in the heart of the city next to the London Eye at County Hall, where we had some of the most influential players in commercial audio and online platforms get together to talk about, well, the future of content, production, AI, ads, sponsorships, and of course, how we measure audiences in this messy and fragmented online world. Now, if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you'll see that we're also regularly publishing flash interviews from our events via the Media Leader Live studio, which has been actually a big step change for us in how we bring you these influential voices that appear on stage at our events. We hope you like them and are always keen for feedback. I've decided to bring you to those conversations that I think were really interesting and, well, deserve your immediate attention. Both are about issues which are really important to both the short-term and long-term future of the UK audio sector. One is the prospect of the BBC launching audio ads for the first time in the UK. And the other is, how do we get the audio sector to reform practices around measurements, whether it's established radio or emerging online audio platforms? I think it's fair to say there's a lot of debate about how we should measure audio audiences, and so far there's not much agreement about the best way to do that. So I'm going to bring you two conversations, each conducted by our audio reporter, Ella Sagar. The first is with Matt Payton, the CEO of commercial radio marketing body Radiocentre, which launched some stark findings on the day of the event, which showed that if the BBC decided to introduce advertising across radio in the UK, the financial impact on commercial radio would be devastating, he said, with a 36% forecast decline in revenues. Ouch. Payton then spoke at our event, The Future of Audio Entertainment, with a fairly nuanced, not really speech. It was entitled, Why an Ad-Funded BBC Would Be Bad for Everyone. We'll be able to share that full speech soon. But for now, here's Payton's interview that he did straight afterwards with Ella, who began by asking him directly, why would UK ads on the BBC, especially given the enormous pressure it's facing with the licence fee from the government, why would it be such a bad thing?
As I was trying to say in the speech that I gave today, look, I think the BBC definitely has a role to play. We really value the role the BBC plays in sort of raising quality and what it does to sort of compete in the audio sector. But I think the BBC needs to be distinctive and it needs to be funded in a different way. And I think what's happened recently is the BBC's made a number of announcements. Understandably, it's thinking about its future. It's thinking about its future funding model, and it's thinking about its future sort of content offer. But what that sort of led it towards, it's led it down a road which I think is dangerous for the BBC and not particularly good for the audio market. So we've seen this announcement about new radio stations that which we think basically are an imitation of what commercial radio audio offers. And we've seen an announcement about trying to monetize podcasts of first-run audio content in the UK for the first time, initially on third-party platforms like Apple and Spotify. Now, those announcements in and of themselves could also already cause harm to the audio sector, particularly commercial radio. But I think what I wanted to talk about today is take the opportunity to say, where does that take us? Because if you can fund BBC podcasts by advertising, why not radio? Why not online? Why not television? And I think I wanted to paint a picture of what the work that we've commissioned, which sort of demonstrates that actually you couldn't fund BBC radio services with advertising at the moment, and it would have a negative impact on commercial radio because the amount of advertising inventory you'd sort of put into the market.
Yeah, I think it was very interesting what you were saying about how the market effectively, from the research, it would have to double to be able to sustain commercial and the BBC, and you can't just double the market. And I think looking forward, you can't blame the BBC for looking into the options, but there would be quite serious consequences for audiences and advertisers as well.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, you'd require a massive expansion in the market. Now, BBC taking advertising in the short term, maybe it could grow the market to a degree, but it wouldn't double it in size. And it also, I think that the important point I wanted to make is, of course, the demographic of the BBC radio at the moment is older than commercial radio. So what would it need to do in order to be able to monetize those hours? It would have to drive younger. It would have to drive more popular content. And so, and it would have to ditch some of its sort of high-value public service content, which keeps it distinctive.
Yeah.
So that's not a great sort of place to be for audiences in terms of the range and diversity of content in audio, and it's not great for the BBC ultimately, because as we demonstrated with the research, actually based on the current budgets, the advertising that they could get because of the demographic of their audience, because of the way they're structured, would fall 63% short overall. Now, some services might break even if you think they would hold on to their audience,
which is a big if.
Yeah, which is a big if, and once you get to that point. But look, it would be a devastating sort of effect for the BBC and for the commercial market, for producers, and actually for advertisers. Because actually, what advertisers get from radio advertising is reach, it's resonance, it's the range of stations that you're able to target. And actually, a lot of that would diminish under this model.
Yeah, and I think on the face of it, it might sound quite an exciting prospect for advertisers, because you've got the BBC very high quality content, and they've got a lot of options in their portfolio, but it's just not a straightforward kind of question of more radio stations means more inventory, which means like more options for us as advertisers. It's not quite as simple as that.
No, I think exactly that. I think what the research was able to sort of demonstrate is let's look at all of the different factors. Let's not just get sort of overexcited by the prospect of we could place our advertising around BBC content. What's wrong with that? Why wouldn't you as an agency want to explore that and have a conversation? But look, that's not what the BBC is for.
No.
The BBC is funded in a different way to provide different things. And look, I think we don't know where the current conversations are going to go. Obviously, there's this review of BBC funding that's going on in government at the moment.
And this research has been being used to kind of input into that.
Exactly, yeah. So we did it in anticipation of this review, and now they've appointed this independent funding panel as well to look at all of these issues. So look, it's another input that goes into the mix as they look at this. But I think they're taking it seriously, and they're looking at it at the moment. But hopefully, there's still time for the BBC and the government to sort of step back from the brink and say, actually, this isn't the way to go. Yes, we need to think about the BBC's future sort of role, remit and funding, but actually having advertising at the heart of it is just not going to work.
And I think there's a nature of the BBC content, and there are so many questions around what its purpose is as well, which is kind of part of that review. And one other element, I think, is no one wants to see radio station closures, and no one wants to see that either on the BBC or on the commercial side. You'd much rather have a positive growth future, and so hopefully that is something that can be established with a slightly different funding situation than taking on advertising on the BBC's part.
Yeah, and look, I think what we've got in the UK overall, I think is a mixed model market that works, which is the commercial sector funded primarily by advertising, and the BBC funded primarily by the licence fee or by some sort of central funding, whether it's the licence fee or something else. Now, I think where we probably will get to is a version of that into the future. But I think, understandably, the BBC and the government want to look at all the different options. But let's rule out the ones that are going to damage diversity, choice, plurality, high-value public service content. Let's rule those out, and let's have a proper conversation about where the industry is heading in terms of its funding model and the range and diversity of its content in future.
And so this time next year, if we're sat having a conversation, what would you hope would be like where we would be in this conversation?
Yeah, so look, I mean, I think obviously the BBC's current licence fee settlement runs until 2027, and so does the Charter. We'll be further along on that journey, but obviously the political context is likely to change. Now, what's that going to mean in practice? I don't know. I suspect, a Labour government will be slightly more sympathetic to some of the positions that the BBC is taking, but at the same time, they don't want to see a privatised BBC either. So I think where we're likely to be is I think perhaps the dividing lines are probably going to become a little bit clearer, and I think the sense of direction in a year's time will be clear that some of these slightly more, outlandish proposals hopefully have been put to bed, and we can sort of move forward in a more productive way
and work on the future of audio and together
in the overall market.
Yeah. And I think everyone would want to see growth and new and variety and innovation and that's...
and I think growth and variety and new sort of content I think is what the industry's been able to deliver over the last sort sort of 10 years, with the brand extensions that commercial radio has been able to develop, the sort of the additional services that we're able to now provide because, DAB has grown, because smart speakers and online listening has grown at such a rate. So, we've been able to do that. I think what we're concerned about right now is the BBC now turning around and saying, well, we want to do exactly the same and provide services that frankly don't really look very distinctive and don't look very different.
So I think commercial needs its uniqueness, and so does the BBC. And I hope that like today's conference shows that there is a lot of breadth to audio and entertainment as well. So thank you so much, Matt, for joining me.
Good to see you. Thank you.
That was Matt Payton there. And, speaking of being distinctive and different, I hasten to add that BBC Radio 4 produces a very good weekly show about media called The Media Show, although it is, if you actually listen to it, it's a very tightly produced radio show that is also put out as a podcast. And in my view, putting radio shows out as podcasts generally doesn't make for a very good podcast production, because if you want to have a fruitful discussion about interesting or deep topics, that's fine, but the nature of radio means it's very quick, moving on very quickly. Maybe fine if you want to catch up about news. So treat it as catch-up radio, but maybe not so much a good podcast format. I would certainly echo Matt Payton's points about the need for distinctive content that leans into the strength of different formats. Don't just use your massive scale to repurpose content all over the place. Anyway, rant over. I'm going to swiftly cut myself off here and bring you to another great conversation Ella had, this time with Michael Bayston, who was at the BBC himself actually for a number of years as a programmatic media ad sales boss before joining the podcast publisher Acast in 2019, where he is now Vice President of AdTech Solutions. Nice to be a Vice President, isn't it? They're all Vice Presidents. Let me tell you why this conversation is interesting. In the planning, I'm going to let you into a little secret here. In the planning for this Future of Audio and Entertainment event, we did a lot of research on what are the key challenges that matter most in audio right now. And I have to tell you, the need for better measurement solutions and greater collaboration between media owners on achieving that was far and away one of the biggest messages we got back. And you know what? Frankly, we needn't have bothered, because we could have just listened to the audience at Future of Audio 2023, where we asked the audience, we asked stakeholders, what's the most important issue? And measurement was by far and away the biggest issue then as well. So Ella began by asking Michael Bayston whether measurement was still the key challenge this year. And the answer is actually much more interesting than you might expect, given what I've just said. So here's Ella and Michael.
So it's been a packed agenda today, and last year we talked a lot about measurement, and it was voted the top priority for audio buyers to kind of as something to help them bring more audio onto their plan. So I wonder, this might be a leading question. So what's the key challenge for audio sector in 2024 and beyond? Is it still measurement, do you think?
Yes, I think it is. But I think actually you could take a step back. It's the biggest, challenge for everything in marketing, really, isn't it? Show me a comms planner who isn't worried about finding the correct audience without duplication, basically, deduplication. So we've obviously just come from that session where Global have talked about the launch of DAX ID, which is very interesting. Obviously, this is a great event to talk about launchings of that sort. But actually, IDs is sort of nothing new in digital. There is a huge scramble going on across all digital channels to find an ID solution to replace the cookie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think a lot has been said today about how digital audio might benefit from the kind of the difficulties with other digital channels trying to find a replacement for the cookie that gives them that tracking and all of those other elements and observes privacy laws and such like. So, but I think another difficulty with digital audio potentially is, and also with other media channels, but different devices, different environments, different platforms, so that makes it very complicated.
Yes, absolutely it does. Obviously I'm here to speak, on behalf of Acast and our many hundreds of thousands of podcast creators. In some ways, in the podcasting space, it's a little simpler, basically, because in terms of, for example, addressability, we are a bit of an edge case. We did in fact have a listening platform some while ago, but we got rid of it because we believe in the open ecosystem of distribution of podcasting via RSS feeds. But again, talking about different platforms, some of my colleagues were here at this event event talking about creativity across video and so forth. So, as a company, we are now supporting our creators by bringing in campaigns from our customers, the advertisers, that go across multiple platforms. But of course, the main one for us is that open ecosystem distribution via RSS, and that is to platforms such as the Apple podcast app, Spotify, and so on and so forth, that we have strategic relationships with. I think for us in podcasting, we've always been good at measuring effectiveness, if you like. We started off as a performance campaign or a performance channel with the host reads and so forth. And particularly, my area of interest as well is audio ads. As we're seeing more and more audio ad business come into it, we've got to find a way to measure that. So obviously there's, working with brand lift solutions and also attribution solutions as well. And in fact, last year we did a big due diligence piece with a number of attribution vendors to find what we felt was the best attribution vendor out there. And we certified a number of them and selected one called Podscribe to be our global partner. And that's working well in that attribution space. Now, in terms of measuring podcasting across the entire ecosystem, the scale, and in terms of the metrics that people want, I think that's the bit that we really need to work on. So we've recently gone to number 1 on the tracker for podcasts globally, and we're at number 2 in the US as well, which is great. Thank you very much. This is good. It's really good to see that. And also our creators are clearly happy. We've given them hundreds of millions of dollars over the last few years. So it's that middle piece around the metrics which is important. And for example, just to finish, one thing that we've done the last couple of years with our partner AdSwiz is we've tried to ensure that we're as transparent as possible based on the IAB regulations in terms of passing data signals like show genre and show name. So that programmatic buyers, for example, when they're buying on Acast, they're able to see exactly which show and which genre an ad impression ran on. So, all of those are things that we're doing in podcasting, but we need to be able to plug this in to the omni-channel plans that our customers have so that we can take the amount of budget that would be commensurate with the sort of audiences that are coming to podcasting.
Because I think overall across the whole of the podcasting world, it's about 5 million podcasts plus, and so that's lots and lots of available inventory and lots of communities to tap into. That's one of my panels that we were talking about today. But I do think that the transparency and the measurement, but also the ease of buying, those are all going to come together. So it's something, I suppose, that dreaded word of collaboration and how that all looks in practice. I wonder what you think maybe this time next year, how do you think things are going to look?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I'd love to see more collaboration amongst us here in the audio industry. It's very interesting for me personally, actually, Ella, because I only really came into audio fairly late in the game.
Okay.
I've always worked with emerging channels for much of my career, but I came into audio after I left the BBC, actually, in late 2019, came to Acast. And one of the things I've noticed about working in other emerging channels, as certainly programmatic or digital audio has been considered to be, is that you really need all the parties to work together. So what I would love to see next year, maybe at this event, for example, would be a little bit more collaboration between us and the other major audio players, your Spotifys, your Bowers, your Globals. Sorry, I've obviously not mentioned a good few companies as well, but a collaboration between us all over a way to measure digital audio that ensures that we are taking the right amount of budget for the amount of audience attention or time spent within our digital or indeed our audio channel, basically. So that's the first thing I'd love to see, more collaboration. Yeah. Secondly, we were just talking about IDs and things like that. What we're seeing is all sorts of organisations are launching IDs. They're launching, measurement sort of standards for themselves. Again, it would be nice if there was a way for these to sort of work across. But I think that's the main key issue here, is we're in a massive arms race, as I said before, to find out what will supplant the cookie, basically. Yeah. And there's a huge opportunity for the company or companies that get that right. So I can sort of see why there's a little bit of jostling at the moment. Just to finish on Acast and podcasts, as I said before, in terms of things like addressability, we're more of an edge case. So we've really lent into things like AI-driven contextual targeting. And in fact, we bought a company 2 years ago called Podchaser, who are best thought of as the IMDb of podcasting, really. So they've got, you mentioned 5 million podcasts there. They've got many of those podcasts on their site and within their data structure as well. So we're working hard on our own data piece as well, which may end up with some sort of Acast ID, I don't know. But I would certainly hope that given that we work across multiple platforms and with multiple different partners, including, for example, all of the major news publishers here in the UK, I feel like we're in a good position to work in partnership, in collaboration with these various other things. So hopefully this time next year you'll see Acast at the centre of some sort of collaboration, which means that audio gets what it's worth.
Yeah, an audio-wide ID.
Yeah.
Is that too much to ask for?
Maybe so. Who knows? Yeah. Won't be drawn on that, but a nice idea. I like it.
Nice idea. Well, here's to more good ideas. I know that we've had lots of sessions on creativity, innovation, and so here's to more of that for this year. Thanks so much for joining me, Michael.
Thank you very much.
Thanks again for listening to the Media Leader podcast. If you like what you hear, guess what? You can read our stuff at our website, themedialeader.co.uk, where you can sign up to our daily newsletter in the UK of analysis, opinion and commentary about what's going on in media and advertising. You can also find us on YouTube. We are posting video interviews and clips from our live events. And don't forget to check out our LinkedIn page, which is often a very interesting way to see what people in the industry are saying about our articles and the issues we write about. Anyway, get back to work. Catch you next time. Bye-bye.